Galaxy Glider, hang 10! Are the kids still saying that? Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Power Rangers Lightning Collection in Space Blue and Galaxy Glider set. This is, I believe, our second release that has a Lightning Collection figure with a vehicle. The first one was the Omega Ranger with his cycle, and unfortunately it is also a double dip because the other way to previously get in Space Blue was with a Psycho Silver pack. I'll have a little bit of a review, not rant, but a review on that practice here at the end. But let's go ahead and just get started and talk about the actual product itself. Starting with our accessories. You got your standard alternate head here. Honestly, to me, this doesn't look too much like TJ at all, and I also feel like he's mad at me. You have your Astrax here, which is decently painted. You know, there's really nothing too wrong with it, and it's basically the exact same. The one you got in the regular release. You'll see in a comparison, though, that like this part actually is a little bit shinier. You have a little bit more of a dull gray plastic here on the original release, so it's a little bit updated, but it has all the main details, and it's a pretty basic weapon as is. You also have the Sidearm Blaster, which is basically identical to the original release. There's a few little minor things, but that might just be between printings, but nothing too huge to write home about. I also can't imagine picking up a second version of the figure for a more detailed sidearm, but who knows. Got your standard lightning effect part here. The most exciting part of the figure is the hands to hold the weapons with. You don't even care about the Galaxy Glider, it's just this. On him, obviously, you can see you have one closed fist and then one karate chop hand, which kind of comes in handy for like a surfing hand. But obviously, the main different accessory here is the actual Galaxy Glider, which is rather basic. These things don't have a lot of extravagant details, so it's pretty hard to mess it up. In my opinion, I feel like there's probably something it's missing that someone's going to notice, but there's nothing for me on it that's missing that I would get upset about. And it overall, I think, looks fine. It does feel a little cheap, like it feels really light. It almost feels like I'm holding a little bit of a bath toy. It feels, and maybe looks to a degree a little bit cheaper than I thought it would, but I still think it's honestly fine. Again, there's nothing about it that for me, I wouldn't recommend this to you if you really wanted it. I think the silver paint here looks pretty good. You know, the blue paint looks a little cheaper because it's kind of got this glossy feel to it, but that's fine. I do like the kind of compound headlight look there. That's kind of nice. I think it's funny here. Right here you have these little gray handles here, is they're actually almost identical to the ones, if I recall, on the old 90s releases, because there was a 90s release of figures that included Galaxy Gliders. Now, they were much different. Unfortunately, I don't have one for comparison. I'm going to put up like a little, you know, side image here for a second from the future. I have red and silver, but they're in storage, but I don't have blue. But those ones basically included those old 90s style bike figures that were actually, I believe, imported from Japan. And those were actually kind of nice because they weren't exactly accurate. It's going to be a more accurate figure overall look-wise than that figure, but those figures were at least a little bit more uniform than your kind of all over the place muscly figures of the age. But it did include also a Galaxy Glider, which, you know, I would say the details are not that different, but I remember the other ones were obviously a little bit smaller. I think they had wheels on the bottom, and then you have like a chrome finish here and stuff like that. So I'd say this one's probably a little bit overall better looking, but they're not too dissimilar from what I remember, because honestly the Galaxy Gliders are pretty basic as is. And you can see right there, there's pegs there to put them on here so you can ride it as you had at the beginning. This is probably more of an user issue. It is kind of annoying sometimes to get him to stay on there. Like I'll often have to screw one of the feet on there, and then as soon as I do that and go for the other one will pop off, and you have to get him in just the right position, otherwise it'll topple over or it'll look funny. Again, that's kind of just something that takes finagling and makes sense. I don't know if there's anything engineering wise they could do about that. I just almost kind of wish this was a little bit more balanced though, like the Galaxy Glider itself, so it wasn't so difficult, at least in my opinion, to get him in the right position. And sometimes I'd get him in the right position and then I would walk away and he would go, so I kind of wish I was a little more balanced. Again, that might just be user error, but it's something I thought I would mention. As far as the figure itself goes, you know, it's pretty much par for your course Lightning Collection stuff. And also, I'm going to do a comparison here in a second, but for me, I think it's basically the exact same figure as the original release. I don't remember them saying anything about there being huge differences. I don't think there is any huge differences. If they are, they're very minor and it's not noticeable. And I find it to be an overall solid figure look-wise. I think the helmet looks good. You got nice paint on there. It's pretty decently proportioned. I would say that maybe for me, this helmet is a little bit puffier than it is in the show. Kind of like with the Galaxy Glider though, it's not something that would stop me from recommending the figure unless that's a huge detail to you. I just feel that the helmet's a little puffy and the overall proportions are probably a little bit puffier and bulkier than the suit actor is. He's definitely a little skinnier in the show. I think the helmet's a little skinnier and like the neck kind of pulls down and is a little bit more slender in terms of the accuracy of the suit. So if that's something that's a huge deal to you, you know, that's kind of a personal thing. Again, for me, it's not something that I would say, oh, this is suddenly an awful figure and I don't recommend it. but it's definitely something I noticed. But otherwise, I think all the details look good. I think the helmet looks good, nice shine, nice paint. The blue looks nice. There is a little bit of scratch paint mistake there on this one that I don't have on my other one, but I think all the colors pop nicely. And you know, it's a little bit too puffy of a mold for the exact accurate Japanese version for Megaranger, but I overall still find it to be a solid figure. You have your standard articulation for it, and I don't have any loose joint problems or anything like that. You have your nice ball joint around here, knee joint here, nice hinge joint here at the waist, ball joint at the chest, nice ball and hinge joint up here, elbow joint up here, swivel around here, and your creepy exorcist head and ball joint stuff. And honestly, this is one of the ones that's really nice because it's nice and like tight joints, but it's not too tight where you're having to do that super clicky thing or anything like that. So I appreciate that. But let's go ahead and do some comparisons quickly. This is like a really weird pose. First off, just in case you haven't watched an In-Space Blue figure review previously in which I compared it, here's some comparisons to some other types of releases. This is the original 90s version release, which, as I always say in these reviews, these are now much more fun to collect for the kind of nostalgia, retro purposes, and if you're looking for something more accurate, this is the superior pick. This is the old Legacy release, which honestly I don't think are half bad. I think the In-Space ones were actually some of the stronger ones, but obviously you're going to get a little bit more of an accurate, less muscly version there, and you can see that the Legacy one's a different shade of blue too. It's a little bit darker. I think the Lightning one's a little bit more accurate, but in case you're shopping for your first In-Space Blue figure and you're looking at other options, there's these, and then obviously that bike figure that I hopefully put a picture up of, which again is a very different style and not something you're also going to go for if you're looking for accuracy. Now here he is next to the original release. This is the original release here. This is the new one. And honestly, they're basically identical for me. Like, this one seems a little bit darker in paint color sometimes, and I would maybe say that sometimes if you're looking really close and you're really wanting to find a difference, this helmet might seem a little more slender, but I think that's just me looking for something, but because you can tell, they're pretty much identical. It's not like the new versions of the mmpr black or mmpr red helmets where there's a clear and obvious difference. Even if there is some sort of difference with them, it's nothing obviously super noticeable to me or something that I'd go out and say like, oh yeah, they updated this one, you better buy this one even if you bought this one. I do kind of find it funny that I have these two here for comparison and I'm trying to tell them apart, like, oh, is there differences? And there was a whole episode where there was like 5 In-Space Blues, and they were using that to sort of trick the enemy. I just think that's kind of funny, but I don't think there's like that big of differences. Other than, obviously, what they come with, because this guy comes with the Galaxy Glider, and the original release came with a Psycho Silver. So which one you pick up just depends on what you're interested in as a bonus. Like, if you're specifically shopping for a TJ figure, you know, you're going to have to decide, like, do I really want the Galaxy Glider, or do I want to build a Psycho Ranger collection? And that kind of brings me to my final verdict. Like, overall, I find this to be a solid set. I don't think In-Space Blue is the perfect, most accurate mold, or one of the most accurate Lightning Collection mold, but I think it's decent enough. If it's a huge deal for you, obviously you're not going to be picking it up, but for me personally, as my recommendation, there's nothing about it overall that would stop me from recommending it, even though it's not perfect. That being said, I have to admit, the practice around this does annoy me a little bit, that they're double dipping so soon. If I remember right, this figure released, and like not long after that, we got the Fan Friday where this was announced, and it seemed like just a really too soon double dip. And it also does bother me slightly that you have to buy effectively some sort of double pack to get a TJ figure. Like, if someone's not interested in one of those, or they're just to save money, it sucks that you either have to buy a 2-figure pack or a vehicle pack. And I wish they would have went about it a little bit differently. It's not that big of a deal, and it's a pretty common practice. It's just a little clunky and messy to me, and I feel like I have more complaints about the practices around the Lightning Collection rather than the collection itself, so I do find that to be a little sucky. But I find the set overall to be okay. But that's about it for this one, though, guys. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.